Thank you very much, and thank you to all the witnesses. I've lots of questions, but I'll leave some of them for hopefully a second round. And I just want to focus on two issues that I think are really core. One is in relation to just going back to the core considerations in the development of the carbon budgets, and specifically the question of climate justice. I'll be frank that I was a little bit disappointed with climate justice, which there is an obligation to consider climate justice, and yet in the technical document, there is very limited consideration. Even in the most recent briefing document that we got from you there, you said there's a statement just that an appropriate contribution to the Paris Agreement is an appropriate response to international climate justice. Yet in the technical report on carbon budgets, the advisory council say it's not the job of the council, any such determination, and this is around what Ireland's contribution should be to the global effort. Any such determination has implicit or explicit implications around climate justice, historical responsibility, equity and equality. It's not the job of the council or the Carbon Budget Committee to make such value judgments. Yet considering equity is one of the obligations under the law. Considering the issue of equity is core, and considering climate justice is one of the key obligations, again, under the bill, under the Act. And I'm particularly concerned at a set of assumptions that seem to have been made in relation to the question of fair share and so forth. So, you know, the climate, the Article 4.1 of the Paris Agreement explicitly talks about the fact that 1.5 has to be achieved in a manner consistent with equity. And it also talks about common but differentiated responsibilities. Yet the decision, and I would just note, sorry, I know that there was really good input that came in. I think it was from Mr. Price and Mr. Smith, who put in really good, ideas about how do you approach equity, how do you approach deciding what the fair share would be. Mr. Smith, I think, set out, 6 different scenarios in terms of how you can approach that. None of those scenarios seem to have been taken. Instead, there's this new proposed Paris test, which it says this is the approach that it's the technical document says it's taking, which is that it would approach is to consider what the temperature outcome would be if every country in the world had the same starting point as Ireland and reduced emissions at the same speed and amount. So that's just factually not true. And I'm really worried about a factual mistruth being part of the modelling. Again, how much weighting you want to give to historical responsibility, how much weighting you want to give to respective capacity, how much weighting you give to the cumulative risk of the future. Those are political decisions. But the facts...
Okay, thank you, Senator.
This is, sorry, Chair, this is, of course, if I could just have...
I'll let you come back in, but you're way beyond the 2 minutes. You're about 4.5 minutes there.
Like then, the question in relation to that, because I am concerned that climate justice, and it's important not just from climate justice perspective, but because it throws off the modelling.
Okay, I'll let you come back in, example, Senator Higgins, in this contribution. Professor O'Gallagher.
Not consistent with the ultimate objective. Our modelling is wrong.
Thank you. Professor O'Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Senator Higgins. And as you mentioned, we were fortunate to have contributions from Paul Price and Andrew Smith, who did essentially part of what's called a top-down analysis to explore what does the Paris Agreement say Ireland's contribution should be, and how do we incorporate that into our carbon budgets. In parallel, we did a bottom-up exercise where we tried to explore the implications of different pathways, different sectoral pathways on Ireland. So if we took different approaches for energy and for agriculture, what implications would they have? And there's 2 elements, I think 2 key elements to my mind on the equity side. One you've touched on correctly in terms of our fair share internationally and our contribution internationally. There's also, though, the question of nationally, the just transition element of this. And both of those are part of the equity remit, if you like, our discussion. And we did take them into account. In addition, with as you can appreciate, we had many obligations that we were asked to consider by the legislation, and we did take, I suppose, our role in that seriously, and what we end up with then is effectively a balancing. So climate justice was part of, and that contribution on what the Paris Agreement might mean for Ireland is, and we did look at and consider our historical emissions and the different implications of the projections associated with the bottom-up scenarios. Now, I'll ask Patricia King maybe to talk about some of the aspects of the national, the just transition.
Sorry. Chair, just because for the reasons of, I know we have limited time and others will want to come in, so I'm not actually asking in respect of just transition with respect, so just to say I'm very interested in that area, but I'm concerned specifically on the assumption in the modelling in terms of our compliance with Paris and the Paris Agreement. So I'm not, okay. Maybe there's a lot of policy and sectoral points which are really important, but I'm really talking about those assumptions that have gone into the modelling. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Senator Higgins.
Thanks for that clarification. I suppose when you talk about equity, I think of both, but in the context of the well, I think I've answered it, but I'll just summarise maybe, and if others want to come in, please do so. But on the as I say, the Paris Agreement alignment analysis, if you like, we did have this top-down analysis from Andrew and Paul, looking at the global carbon budget, looking at, and there are significant, there's a wide range within that, but looking at then different dimensions to Ireland's fair share, because Ireland's fair share, you're right, it is very broad. You can look at historical emissions, you can look at, and there's a whole literature on this, and there's a whole international process associated with this. But when we were looking at the modelling, we looked at the different scenarios of emission reduction pathways for Ireland. So it's not that the models made any interpretation about the Paris Agreement. These were two parallel pieces of analysis. One is by its nature top-down, if you're looking at a global carbon budget and trying to estimate what might be reasonable for Ireland in that context, and at the same time doing then bottom-up analysis to understand the implications of different pathways which we were required under the Act. So that's essentially how, and then we, as I say, we took on board both of those pieces of analysis. We also, as you say, in the report, considered this this Paris test. It wasn't something that it was part of that analysis on the Paris Agreement. It was one part of that analysis, but we thought it was interesting to kind of explore that in terms of what the temperature contribution would be of the different pathways that we were considering in terms of those different sectoral emission shares. But as I say, what we arrived at in terms of the final carbon budget was effectively I suppose a collective view on the optimum based on all of the different considerations that we were obliged to take into account.
Okay, thank you, Professor O'Gallagher. Thank you, Senator Higgins.